This is a problem. I mean, I think Bryan is wrestling with like a straw man here. I mean, because whoever said that you just like, you know, randomly throw money out there. Now, okay, there isn't a straw man. There is actually a real person, GLS Shackle, right? But Shackle is not necessarily like, I mean, and he was very poetic. And he recognized the cognitive problems that the individual has, but he has no recognition of the institutions which aid individuals in doing that. A few years ago, I read this book. It's a popular book on probability theory by Bernstein called Against the Gods. I highly recommend it to everyone. It's a very nice little discussion about that. But what struck me when I was reading it was how relevant it is to actually what Mises was writing about in the economic calculation problem. Because one of the ways that you can think about the way what Mises was trying to say was how in the absence of different institutions such as private property in the means of production are individuals going to be able to engage in present value calculations. See, his argument, Mises' argument, is about the ability of agents to make present value calculations, which is right in Bryan's line. And in the absence of those institutions, which puts him far ahead of all of his contemporaries, because all his contemporaries thought you could engage in those present value calculations independent of the institutional environment. And Mises is saying, without this institutional environment, you will not have the knowledge surrogates which are necessary to do the present value calculation. And Bernstein's book is a history of how capitalism is a development of the ability to engage in risk assessment and risk management. Again, right along Bryan's lines. So I think there's a way in which, I don't see how it is that, like, you know, Bryan has this caricature, and admittedly some people like Lockman and Shackle push in a certain direction, and Kerzner, to try to maybe create his little market niche or whatever, puts in a certain direction. But the idea that somehow agents are sitting there going, you know, like it's or you know, it's all like Forrest Gumpy, you know, kind of thing. You know, Austrian economics is the history of Forrest Gump or something. I don't think that that's right. I think that Mises, for example, was very adamant that he was talking about the ability to engage in risk assessment and risk management, and then without the institutions of capitalism, you know what? You can't do it. Now that claim we can debate about. That's a hypothesis that we can now chew on. But I think that would be a way for us to think about these issues.
Yeah, I mean, and I would actually say, as you probably know, I'm no big fan of government, but even there, I'll say, someone who's the dictator of a country still has some idea about what the effects of their policies are going to be. So, for example, when Lenin has all of his opponents shot, I think he is correctly estimating this is going to increase the long-term survival of the regime. He might be wrong. Might be that it turns out that this so alienates people that you wind up ending your term sooner. Right, or ending your rule sooner, but I think even someone who's running a government, right, nevertheless, when they act, they have some idea about what's going to happen. And, so I think even in the case of government, I don't think radical uncertainty is really appropriate. Although I'll happily say there's often more uncertainty, right? But that's different from saying it's radical. Or actually, Ted has an answer.
I just had a question, Bryan. I go back and look at neoclassical economics. I don't really see much institutional stuff in it. I mean, you look at, you're automatically at equilibrium, it seems, all the time. Or at least implicitly, you don't worry about how you get there. Isn't that the benefit of Austrian? I mean, that they come and say, it's not automatic. There's a process. And I don't think neoclassical economics worried about that, did they?
I mean, what I say, and I think actually people agree with me, is if you go to the textbook, they'll have a whole account which is very similar to the Austrian one. People see profit opportunities. They just haven't bothered to put it into the mathematical model. But I think I see that as basically sociological, where some things are more publishable than others, right? And that isn't something. Many things that look good in the textbook, and people will all say, of course that's true. Nevertheless, you can't get an article out of it, so no one bothers to write it up.
So you think they already thought that way? They just didn't write it down.
Yeah, I mean, they may, it's true they don't talk about it as much as Austrians do, but still, I mean, ask any mainstream economist, how is it the markets equilibrate? If you have a surplus, what happens? They'll tell you just what people tell you.
But the problem is that they're more attuned to this market failure notion because they don't see they don't focus on the adjustment processes. See, here. Okay, so now I'm going to make an Austrian claim. All right, it's only because of the frictions that markets work. right? It's only because of the imperfections in the world. The only reason why I can walk on this ground is because there's friction between the soles of my feet and the ground. In a world which is frictionless, I'd fall on my butt. And the Austrians are making a similar claim about the nature of the way markets work. It's only because of the things that neoclassical models in like a Stiglitzy world or an Akerlof world would identify as potential reasons for market failure that markets ever work. Because those are the things that give rise to the arbitrage opportunities and the spur for innovation. And so that's what I would say. And the other thing is sociologically is that Bryan's right. All neoclassical economists agree to a large extent, 90% of issues or whatever, at principles level. Or at some basic level, like do you believe minimum wage or not, or something like that. It's only when you get to the advanced theory that the divergence becomes farther apart. But you know what? That's what Mises says. Mises says, well, when you want to do baby economics, rely on supply and demand curves. When you need a crutch, you know, when you're teaching like children how to do economics, do a little math, do a little supply. But when you want to do like real economics, then you have to do this. It's just that he only argued that there was only 5 people in any generation who could do real economics. And we have a profession which has to supply a bunch of adolescents with economics. That's supposed to annoy you. All right.
Francisco?
Yeah, just a question. It seems to me that why it seems to be such a relevant question to ask, okay, who made the emphasis on institutions first? Okay, say the Austrians won. They made the emphasis on institutions first. But now there's mainstream people who are also paying attention to institutions. So does it really matter to look back and see who should be getting credit? Or is it more important to see, okay, who's going to be able to make more progress sooner? Or who is more persuasive? Because sometimes it seems to me that, I don't know, I have been in Mason for 3 or 4 years. I don't even know if I'm an Austrian or not. Probably not. I haven't taken Professor Boettke courses, but I have been in the seminars. I don't know, but sometimes I get the impression that to be a successful Austrian economist, sometimes you can do better coming out with your interesting questions and ideas, but just forget about the label. Will that be a strategy that you would recommend? Like just like looking, instead of looking backwards, who said things first? Okay, who's going to come out with innovative ideas in the future, or more interesting questions in the future?
Bryan.
I mean, I think it very much depends upon what kind of Austrian economics you want to do. If you want to philosophize about radical uncertainty, throwing away the Austrian labels will help, right? You will just be seen as an unnamed strange thing rather than a named strange thing. And the people who would have considered hiring you won't notice you in the crowd. On the other hand, if you want to ask substantive questions, yeah, then throwing away the label will probably help. Right? So that's purely from the point of view of grad student strategy. There's enough grad students here, or potential grad students, it's worth mentioning.
When I first came out of graduate school, I think having the Austrian label was an advantage to me because it made other people think I was smarter than what I was. Which is that, like, when I would make an argument, they could complete it because they'd say, oh yeah, that's something Hayek would say, or that's something Mises would say. And now I actually think the Austrian label is actually a straitjacket to me. Because whenever I say something that I think is new, people say, oh, well, that's just an Austrian argument. And they read it back into the other ones. Now, I do think that Austrian economics is capable of making significant progress, and in fact, that the economics profession has moved significantly in our direction. We should take advantage of it. And I do think that Bryan's right, that there's a sociology of Austrians which is sort of a problem that you have to fight against. That is, I'm going to go in the economics profession, never study philosophy, but I'm going to write about epistemology. I'm going to go into economics and work on the topics that nobody else